The research vessel began moving across the sea early in the morning, as always, slowly and steadily. The metal surface stretching across the deck seemed to resonate with the hum of the engine vibrations, spreading throughout the ship's interior. Every part of the ship seemed to breathe in the same rhythm. This voyage, like previous ones, was no ordinary journey. This ship sought what lay hidden in the depths, the unseen, and the things people would sacrifice everything to find. This dedicated crew had turned their research toward the wreckage of the Golden Plane. Do you think this golden aircraft wreckage will be found? Everyone working on the ship had begun their daily routines. Technicians were checking cable lines. The sonar team kept their eyes glued to the frequencies. Divers were quietly preparing their diving equipment. Although these actions seemed like routine tasks repeated in every investigation, they were extremely important for the fine line between man and nature, because the underwater world did not forgive mistakes. Everyone on this ship was aware of this fact. Have you ever found a valuable item underwater? You can share how you found it with us.
The current trajectory is stable at 0.05.
Acknowledged. Maintaining course and speed.
In the captain's cabin, the underwater details began to be examined in detail on the screens that opened. As the data approached, it appeared more clearly on the screens. According to recent research, a large part of the world's oceans had not yet been mapped in detail. Therefore, every voyage this ship undertook was not only a mission or research, but also a step towards the unknown. The collected data could only help up to a certain point. What the captain and the crew needed most was luck. The sea's memory can store these objects for a long time, but one day it will inevitably choose to speak. That morning, the sea had chosen to speak. Do you also enjoy listening to the sea's whispers? When the first distinct shapes appeared on the sonar screen, no one spoke. Everyone had begun to feel the excitement inside. Even though they couldn't clearly see what they were looking for on the screens, their hope of finding it had grown. What they found was not something you would see in an ordinary wreck. As the image was enlarged, the color of the light reflected from the screen began to change. This was not a wreck with a normal metal surface. Yet, despite the salt, this surface still retained its brightness strongly. This reflection, reminiscent of a golden hue, caused the team to become even more excited. This structure had not formed randomly. The team now knew what they had to do. They wanted to descend into the depths and see what they had found with their own eyes. It was time to begin preparations. The preparation order created a silence on deck. The diving operation was not merely a technical exercise, it was also a mental transition process, because the divers knew that when they met the sea, they would be completely alone with nature. The divers had begun checking their equipment. One by one, they carefully checked all their devices and diving gear. As the human body descends underwater, it begins to hear the sounds of its own body rather than the surrounding world. Think about the conditions under which you experience this feeling we are talking about. If you want to experience this feeling with us, you can subscribe and join all our expeditions and dives. The surface light is still visible in the first few meters, but as the depth increases, the red colors disappear completely. According to biology, in the twilight zone that begins at a depth of 200 meters, light becomes nothing more than a memory. The only thing divers hear is the rhythm of their breathing. Right at that moment, the diver's light hit the hull. The light reflecting off the surface was not the glint that an ordinary piece of metal could produce. The reflection from the light gave our divers the feeling that they had found what they were looking for. A golden-toned reflection began to appear in the water in the area where the light spread. As they got closer, a distinct golden aircraft fuselage emerged. This was not a cargo crate. This was not a fuselage fragment. This aircraft did not resemble an ordinary passenger plane. The aircraft's external form was proof that it was a custom-built aircraft. The fact that this custom-built aircraft was completely gold-plated and that its owner did not search for it where it crashed raised questions. The fact that the plating was so well preserved suggested that it had been deliberately placed there rather than crashed. What purpose could be behind this, in your opinion? Divers began scanning the area. The sand layer and corrosion marks were carefully examined. Measurements showed that the fuselage had not moved from its position for a long time. If this aircraft had accidentally crashed into the water, structural stress marks would have been clearly visible. The wings would have separated and the fuselage would have broken apart, even if only from underneath. However, there was no sign of any disintegration here. The fuselage remained completely intact. This structure had been placed here in a controlled manner. Expert reports stated that the gold plane had been deliberately placed here. When the entry panel was detected, the process of opening the door of the golden aircraft proceeded slowly and gradually. The darkness inside the cabin of the golden aircraft, combined with the silence of the water, created an almost physical sense of weight. When light was shown inside, the seat arrangements appeared intact. The interior upholstery retained its shape. We expect those wishing to travel on this aircraft to show their interest by clicking the like button. The fact that both the interior and exterior of the aircraft were completely custom designed indicated that it belonged to a high-end customer. The presence of this aircraft here was the result of a decision. What we all wondered was, what compelled them to make that decision? As preparations for the lift began, every movement underwater took on greater significance. Lifting lines were attached to structurally sound areas of the hull. Sediment layers were carefully removed to prevent them from dispersing during load transfer. As the hull began to lift, clouds of sand rising in the water proved once again how long it had been there. With every meter of ascent, the tone of the gold-plated surface changed. Microscopic particles in the water amplified the light reflected from the surface, making the image more dramatic. The gold-plated hull rose from the depths toward the water's surface with a heavy but steady movement. When the aircraft passed over the deck, no one shouted, no one rushed. In such moments, the astonishment that rises within a person often manifests itself in the form of silence. As the crane arm slowly placed the fuselage in the center of the deck, water droplets trickled down the metal surface. Sunlight moved in long lines across the gold plating, revealing every curve, every aerodynamic detail. The crew formed a circle. No one wanted to be the first to touch it, because what stood on the deck was not just a valuable object, but also the trace of an intention, a choice, and perhaps an irrevocable plan. The documentation team began their measurements. They examined the coating, checking for wear on the surface. After sharing the data they had collected with the research vessel, the first thing they noticed was that the aircraft did not match any registered manufacturer. This information raised even more critical questions. This treasure lay on the seabed, its owner unknown. If this golden aircraft was produced as a symbol of power, why was it left on the seabed instead of with its owner? More than its value, the story it carried began to arouse curiosity. As the sun approached the horizon, the golden surface took on a warmer, heavier hue. What began as a technical operation early in the day transformed into a quiet inquiry into one's inner world as evening approached. Because what stood on the deck was not just an airplane, it was a visible manifestation of the human urge to store, protect, conceal, and leave behind. Some objects are made to be displayed, others are made to be hidden. So which was this plane? Is the true value hidden in what an object is, or in why it was left where it was? Perhaps it was a symbol of wealth. Perhaps it was a display of power. Perhaps it was the unfinished shadow of an inheritance. Perhaps it was the silent symbol of a story that would never be told. So what do you think? Why would such a plane be left at this depth and in this condition? I'd love to see your thoughts in the comments, because in stories like this, there's no single right answer, and perhaps we'll read the continuation of this discovery together. If you want to be part of this journey and witness other silent stories hidden beneath the sea, join us on this voyage of discovery. because when the next dive begins, we'll be here again.